Now, as a final step in this application, I want to come back to this button in the header, to this header card button. Everything works in this application, but I want to play a little animation on this button whenever we add an item to the cart, or also when we remove an item. So whenever the amount of items in the cart changes. And for this, I already prepared something in the CSS file, which I provided to you earlier. I set up a little CSS animation here, which makes the button bump and change its scale. Now we just need to make sure that this class, which starts this animation, this CSS class, is added to the button. For this, here I'll add a little constant button classes, and I'll simply set this equal to a string using the template literal notation with backticks instead of single quotes. And here I will always add classes.button, but then conditionally I want to add the animation class. Now, to show you how it works, I will add it right away, not conditionally, but always for the moment. And that's the bump class. And now here for class name on the button, I set this equal to button classes. If you save it and reload, you see this bump animation here. It only plays once, but later it should play whenever this card changes. To make that happen, we can utilize useEffect. We haven't used it thus far in this application because we had no traditional side effect up to this point. No local storage access, nothing like this. Of course, you could add such features, but here we simply don't have it. Therefore, here I will utilize useEffect to play this animation. And therefore, here in the header card button, I'll import useEffect and then call useEffect here in this component function. Now we pass our effect function to that and then our array of dependencies, as you learned. Now here in this effect function, I want to do one simple thing in the end. I want to change my button classes to include the bump animation class, and then I want to set a timer which removes that class again so that when it's added again in the future, it again plays. So therefore, I will also import useState because we'll need to re-evaluate and re-render this component when that animation class is added conditionally. So here I'll call useState, set this to false initially, because this will control whether or not the button should be animated. And I'll name it button is highlighted and set button is highlighted. Of course, the state names are up to you. Here in useEffect, I'll then call set button is highlighted and set this to true. Then, as a next step, here for my button classes, I will not always add the bump class, but I'll check if button is highlighted is true. And if that's the case, classes.bump is added, otherwise an empty string is added. So no extra CSS class is added then. And I do this here because since I'm updating the state, the whole component will re-execute when that state changes. So this line will also change again, and the updated classes will be picked up down there. Now, of course, I don't always wanna change this state though. I only wanna change it if my items changed and if the length is greater than 0. So if there is at least one item in the cart, let's say. Hence here I will check if cart CTX items length is equal to 0, in which case here I'll just return so that the rest of this effect function doesn't execute. Because this should only execute if we have at least one item in the cart, let's say. Now we need to add this as a dependency, but if I add cart context like this, this effect would rerun whenever anything about my cart context changes. And that's not what I want here. Therefore, I'll use object destructuring to pull out the items, to get them out of my cart, so that here I can just refer to items and pass items as a dependency. So that not the entire context, but only the items array is a dependency for this effect function. Of course, we can also pull this out a little bit earlier and, for example, also then refer to just items here. Now, if we save this, if I reload, if I click Add, watch the button in the top right corner. It now bumps. But only the first time I add something. The reason for that is that then this class is added, but since it's currently never removed, thereafter it never changes, because the animation is actually only played when this class is added for the first time. Therefore, we should also remove the class after the animation finished. And I'll do that by setting a timer here. I'll set a timer which fires after 300 milliseconds, because that's the duration of this animation here. I played over 300 milliseconds, so after that duration, I trigger a function where I set button is highlighted back to false. And if that's false, this here will ensure that an empty string is added to the class's string instead of the bump class. So that will remove that CSS class from the rendered DOM. Now I also want to add a cleanup function where I clear that timer in case that component should be removed. This can't happen in this application, the button is always there, but it's still a good practice to clean up any timers or any other side effects that might be ongoing because you started them in useEffect. So here I'll return my cleanup function. You learned that if you return a function in useEffect, this will be called automatically as a cleanup function by React. And here I'll call clear timeout and clear that timer, so that when this effect reruns, we clear the timer. And actually, we do need this here, now that I think about it, because of course this timer can be set again before it expired. If we add multiple items rapidly after each other, we want to clear the old timer and make sure that a new timer is set and the old timer is, well, cleared. So we definitely should have that cleanup function here. And now we do. And with that, if we save this, if I reload, you see, whenever I add an item, this button bumps. And that's just a little visual tweak, and in addition, as a nice side effect, no pun intended, it's another practice and exercise of useEffect, which you need for handling side effects.